You've entered Bookstorm. Your favorite authors are here to dive down deep into their best-selling books. Stay tuned to brave the storm.
Welcome back to Bookstorm Podcast listeners. I'm your co-host, Kristen Civiletto, and with me is Julia Rose. And we are excited that you're tuning in from 105 different countries and territories, all 50 states. And we know why, because we are bringing you the very best authors that are writing today. And today is no exception. We're just thrilled that we have internationally best-selling author JOANNE Harris. Welcome, JOANNE.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, we are especially excited because we've been longtime fans of your phenomenal writing. And if you don't mind, I'd like to tell our listeners just a little bit about your background because we know they've probably encountered you in different writing, novellas, all kinds of things because you're a very prolific author. But I'd like to give them that kind of big picture. But you were born to a French mother and an English father. You've studied modern and medieval languages at Cambridge. You taught for a period of time. And during that time, when you were teaching, you published what became a very famous novel called Chocolat in 1999. It went on to be made into an Oscar-nominated film starring Juliette Binoche, which most of us have seen and loved that movie. In fact, we rewatched it in honor of this interview. And so it was especially nice because now we've got the prequel that we're here to talk about. And Julie, do you have a copy of the book? We could show that beautiful cover with Vianne. Is that how you pronounce it?
Actually, it's pronounced Vienne in French, but
Vienne.
yeah, I guess
Got
you'll
it.
be fine either way.
And it is a prequel to the book Chocolat, and it's been long awaited. I know you probably get fans writing you all the time to write more about those characters. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. Sometimes I find that my readers are very diverse. And so there are people who just read the books about Vianne Rocher. There are the ones who only follow the thrillers. There are the ones who only read the fantasy. And then there are the ones that read them all. But there's a lot of affection for Vianne and her daughters. And there's still a lot of interest in where she's going. And in this case, where she came from.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm not surprised because you have written over 20 novels. You've written novellas, short stories, game scripts. You've written for short operas, screenplays. It's just amazing how you have that facility between the different genres of writing and even music. That's pretty amazing.
Well, I think that stories lend themselves to exploring different media. And I've always been interested in seeing how you can express yourself differently depending on what medium you're using. So music and storytelling lend themselves very well to each other. But then so does theatre, so does film, so does dance. I've even made some experiments in the narratives of scent recently, because even scent has its own beginning, middle, and end narrative. And I found that actually it accompanies stories very well. And so I've been trying to have a kind of more immersive experience for some of my followers and readers. And it's been a really interesting journey for me.
Yeah. Well, that's evident in your story that we're here to talk about today because it's a taste sensation in terms of your descriptions and not just about chocolate, because we're talking about an immersion, an experience that these characters also experience. So it's pretty cool that we're going to dive into that a little bit. I first do want to tell our listeners, though, that you have received so many awards and accolades. Your books are published in over 50 countries. You've won many international and British awards, and you're an honorary fellow of St. Catherine's College, Cambridge. You've got so many awards that literally I could list them forever and ever, but they all point to one thing, that you have such a beautiful talent, and people love, love, love the things that you write and you think about. And you're very active in engaging with people through your website about the various things that you enjoy writing about. So I think that's pretty cool as well.
I think I'm very lucky. I mean, I was once told by a very famous British author that an author, if they are lucky, gets 12 good years. Well, I've had something like 30 so far, and I'm still here. And so I just feel that I've been very privileged, and I've got so many loyal readers, and they're so engaged. They're just so interested in the stories and where they come from and the characters and where they're going.
Yes. Well, that's a testament to your talent. So you could call it luck, but we're going to call it ability and talent. And just like you pointed out, you have characters that people have connected with and they want to know more about them, which is pretty neat.
It is. I think it's always a bit of a mystery to me what people are going to gravitate towards, who they are going to like. I mean, obviously, I have to be interested in all my characters, otherwise I wouldn't write them. And I have some favorites, and I think, will people get this person, or will they not? But I think, it's been good to see them with so much affection for Vianne and her daughters, and so much appetite to find out where they're going. And a lot of people say, oh, well, what's going to happen next? And of course, I actually don't know. I have to wait until Vianne contacts me.
Right.
And the same is true with my other characters too. But I do find myself returning to certain voices that are really now very familiar to me, and so I can do them quite easily. And it becomes it's a very pleasant thing to slip into that character again after 5, 6, 7 years and find the voice still there.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to give our listeners some background to the story that we're here to discuss today. So I won't give any spoilers, and if there's anything that you want to add, please do. All right, so we're going to talk about Vienne. And on the evening of July 4th, a young woman scatters her mother's ashes in New York and follows the call of the changing winds to the French coastal city of Marseille. For the first time in her life, Vienne feels in control of her future. Charming her way into a job as a waitress, she tries to fit in, make friends, and come to terms with her pregnancy, knowing that by the time her child is born, the turning wind will have changed once again. As she discovers the joy of cooking for the very first time, making local recipes on her own with the addition of bittersweet chocolate spices, she learns that this humble magic has the power to unlock secrets. And yet her gift comes at a price, and Vienne has a secret of her own, a secret that threatens everything. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think that's great. I didn't write it, so I can say that's a very nice summary. Yes, thank you.
Lovely. So I will dive right in. Throughout the story, we see Vienne struggling with choices. Does she pursue a domestic life as a mother or a free one as Vienne? She's trying to figure out how to live life on her own instead of one that was chosen for her. But she really struggles, I think, under her mother's influence. She hears it through memories, she remembers her stories. And I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about all the influences pulling her in different directions, because I think that's something really relatable for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, when I was writing this iteration of Vianne, I had to keep reminding myself that she is not quite the Vianne that we know in Chocolat and in the later books. She's had a trajectory that has followed my life, if you like. We've had a lot of the same experiences in motherhood. But this is a Vianne who doesn't know how to be a mother, who hasn't yet had her child, who hasn't learned all the things that she learns on this path that I've taken her on. So I had to look at her voice and try and deconstruct it a bit and try to make it younger and more raw and less knowledgeable, and less self-assured. So this is a Vianne who doesn't quite know who she is. She's not even called Vianne when she arrives in Marseille. She's called something else. She's traveled under a number of different aliases. She doesn't really know her real name. She ends up choosing a name for herself and choosing a trajectory. But that changes because there are a number of voices that she connects with that try to direct her journey. And one is her mother's voice, which is still very strong in her consciousness. Her mother has been her closest friend, her only friend, really, for all this time. She's never been alone before. And so her mother still talks to her. She still hears her. And her mother has issues of her own, always has done. She's always been afraid to stay in one place. She's been afraid to connect with other people, afraid for Vianne to make friends, or even to have toys that she gets too attached to. And so now Vianne has choices, but her mother's voice has not gone away. And as she starts to make friends in Marseille and realize that actually there are other ways to go than her mother's way, she starts to hear another voice. And this is a voice of the wife of the bistro owner that she's working for, a woman who's been dead for 20 years, but who has left her cookbook with her little thoughts and her observations on life, and also the food of her childhood and of her life. And she too is a powerful voice in Vianne's mind. And she says the opposite of what Vianne's mother says. She says, You can settle down. It's safe. It's okay. You can love. You can be loved. You can have friends. You can have a home. And cooking is also a kind of magic, not the magic that your mother taught you, but something else. But it still works and it can still affect change. And so she has these two opposing voices, these strong women of a certain age telling her that she has at least two roads that she can walk down. And then there is the third voice, the voice of a mysterious woman called Hanassine, who is an Arab woman who lives in Marseille, who keeps popping up at various times. And she is a slightly more ambivalent presence, if you like, telling Vianne that, yes, she has choices, but every choice comes with a price. And sometimes the price can be very high.
I thought Margot's voice was so interesting in this story because she represented everything that Vianne's mother was not, in terms of a woman who wanted desperately to give birth to a child and raise a child and have that domestic tranquility that she really, really sought after and wrote about. And so it was interesting to see how she was being pulled in these different directions by two very different women who offered their own, unique, not just an outlook on life, but an outlook on mothering, on men, on marriage. It was very well done. Those were fantastic characters. Well, I want to ask you then about something else. Of course, we're talking a lot about food and cooking and chocolate, as you had referenced a second ago. But Guy, one of the characters in the story, had this beautiful description of chocolate. And I want to ask you about this. He calls it ancient magic, brought from the sky by the Mayan gods as a gift to humanity, valued higher than gold, he says, and used on the most occult of rituals. Stolen by the conquistadors, it brought down two popes, the church, crossed to every continent, and now it's here, right here in Marseille, working its magic on everything. Okay, is there an inherent power to this gift of chocolate, or is it something that gives free expression to some of the gifts that we might already possess? What do you think?
I think it's an interesting question. I think there's a lot in this book about magic and power, but there's also a strong message that we choose to invest it in the things that we invest it in. But actually, we find it in ourselves. We choose to express it in different ways. Vianne's mother has a number of ways of expressing that power and that magic. Margot expresses it through cooking. Hamassine expresses it, in very different ways. And it is not specifically the chocolate that matters, it's what the chocolate means. Now, to me, chocolate has always been fascinating because it's so interesting. It's such an old foodstuff. It has been around for such a long time. There are so many stories and beliefs around it. So it's packed with folklore, mythology, stories. So to me, it's got that kind of power because a lot of what I write is about the power of stories and what they bring us to do. So it's an inspiration from that respect, but it's also a mysterious, mind-altering substance. We don't quite know what the chemicals in chocolate are, why they change our mood, why they do the things they do to us. It originally came over from South America, and nobody knew what it was. Nobody wanted to try it because, to Europeans it was inedible. It was a sort of bizarre concoction that just didn't taste good, and it little by little became part of, well, everything. It's everywhere now. It's in every country. Everybody knows it. It's fascinating the journey that it's had and the divisions that it's caused socially, the beliefs that have been held around it, and the dreadful taboos around it too. While it was entering European culture, the church has always had a bit of an ambivalent attitude to chocolate, and it's been banned so many times and then brought back again and banned again. And so yes, an interesting thing to focus on, I think, in terms of a metaphor for power and for transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, too, we see an incredible variety of ways that chocolate might be prepared by people who are also choosing a variety of ways to live their life. And so I thought that was also another metaphor for just the variety of the things that people love and who they love.
Yes, I think that there's a lot of There's a lot of diversity in the city of Marseille, and so there's a lot of diversity in this story too. There is a lot here about families and what that means, how you don't have to choose your birth family to be your heart's family, that your family can be a found community. And Vianne, particularly, who knows very little about her family and who's lost her mother, finds herself connecting with people that she meets and having strong feelings for them. And so there's that too. And this is what leads her into the path really that takes her to chocolate, because at the beginning of the book, this is a Vianne who doesn't know the first thing about chocolate. She's never really eaten it. It's always been a bit of a luxury that she and her mother couldn't afford. And when she does try it, when Guy Lacarrière, the chocolatier, whose passion for chocolate draws her in just because of his enthusiasm, gets her to taste the chocolate that he makes from traditional methods, from ethically sourced fair trade beans, right down to the bar, controlling the whole of the process with this alchemy that he believes in. It's disgusting. She doesn't like it. So it's about her journey towards cooking, towards chocolate, towards understanding that, this process too is a kind of magic.
Yeah. And
So, picking at some threads of what we've already talked about with power and choice, and these kind of seemingly inanimate things having some sense of power over us, Vienne says that we all long for the power to change our world, our lives, and sometimes even ourselves. And perhaps that's why we invest in objects and rituals with significance. So, like chocolate, do these things have any significant power themselves, or are they tools to access things that are already within us and within other people that may bring them together or bring things to the surface? And on that note, what would Vienne say about things like religion or her mother's cards?
Well, I think these things are significant when we want them to be significant. As human beings, we have a strong tradition of ritualistic thinking and behavior. And I've talked so much about folklore and superstition and religion and belief and faith. And I think that those things exist on a kind of long sliding scale, if you like, that they are not too far away from each other, because when we look at the history of religions have their moment and then they decline into mythology and legend when they don't have any followers anymore. And so there is a link between what we believe, what we have believed, what perhaps we will believe in the future. And all these things are part of our shared history as human beings, but it's not specifically the ritual that matters. It doesn't matter if you light a red candle at midnight, or you cast some tarot cards, or you do scrying in some melted chocolate. What really matters is what's going on in here. It's how much power you invest in it and how much that ritual allows you to look within and to understand what's really going on. And so the idea of effecting change is effectively at the heart of what we call magic. The idea that, it's not necessarily just about princes into frogs and people flying on broomsticks. It is the idea that you can change yourself, the world, or the way people see you. And when we look at the language of magic, it's full of these words like charisma and charm and glamour and enchantment. And these have dual meanings. Sometimes they are the language of fairy tale. We understand that. But they are also the language of the human heart. They are human qualities as well. Everybody knows somebody with charm, somebody who can just walk into a room and everybody looks at them. And it's not necessarily something to do with beauty. It is just something to do with character. And this too is a kind of human magic. So when I talk about domestic magic and everyday magic, these are the things that I'm talking about in the books.
This is probably a little bit more akin to the movie Chocolate because we just watched it. But that idea, that theme of character and having chocolate and other things not necessarily have power themselves, but be a mirror or a window to kind of like confront your own self was very, very prevalent in your other works because I felt as we were watching, it wasn't about the chocolate. It was people finding something new about themselves, figuring out what they want, meeting new people, community, and that ran through this book as well. So that was really strong.
Absolutely. It's not really about the chocolate. It's what the chocolate means to people. It is the way they express themselves through that, through their behavior, through their attitude. Chocolate is one of those things that divides people. You know, everybody knows somebody who never eats chocolate because they're absolutely convinced that it will do something terrible. And everybody also knows somebody who eats chocolate all the time because for some reason they need to, and it's essential to their well-being. And so, yes, this
I
is
was
part
just
of
going to say, we're
that.
looking at
I
her.
knew there'd be one. I knew there'd be one. And, and, and so we invest it with this significance because it we sense, I think, that it has this weight of history and folklore and meaning. But also, it's a very useful indicator of character. Just food as an indicator of character in my books is something that I've really explored. I've gone to all the different things that food can mean for us, from celebration, love, tolerance, family, culture, sometimes a darker side of food, which is about fear or deprivation or famine. The West is, of course, riddled with insecurities about food and what it means, but it is something which actually unites all of us as human beings. We all understand the concept of feasting, fasting, hanging on to a culture through certain special dishes that have been handed down from the past, hanging on to the idea of family because everybody has a recipe that somebody passed down from somewhere and it's more meaningful than, just the calories that it gives.
And I love that you explore those important topics, but often against the backdrop of the church metaphorically looking down on the people in the town and kind of overshadowing, because here physically we had a statue that was elevated and a presence in this town and in the lives of people. So again, I love that you're always writing on two levels, exploring those, the human magic versus the spiritual beliefs that they may possess that's always lurking in that background.
Yes, that's really
Mm.
part of the reason that I chose Marseille as the setting for this, because partly of its diversity, the fact that it's a city divided by the church and tourism and secularity, but also a very strong religious history. It's an old place. It's an incredibly socially diverse place. It's a place of incredible wealth, but also the worst poverty in France. And it has this basilica looking down from the hill, with this statue of the Virgin Mary and the child on top of it. And because this is a book about motherhood as well as about belief, to me, that was a potent symbol. It was a good thing to have the Holy Mother standing there, looking down on these other examples of motherhood. Margot, who can never be a mother, um, who dies in childbirth, having desperately tried to become a mother. Vianne, who doesn't know how to be a mother, who is desperately trying to learn. Vianne's own mother, who I think to many people would have been seen as quite a bad mother in many ways, and the Holy Mother there to try to unite everybody and give them hope. So yeah, there's that too, and I wanted that to be a visual reminder of that theme.
For sure. Well, I want to talk about something that Vianne's mother said repeatedly to her. She told her to avoid fixing other people's lives, not to become too invested or entangled in the lives of others, and especially because staying in one spot as you're investing in their lives would root her and make her helpless as a flightless bird. So I wanted to ask you about this because do you think that Vianne's mother was projecting her own fears onto her daughter? And do you think maybe she was struggling with some demons that tainted her relationships?
I think that inevitably we tend to imprint our own patterns and behaviors onto our children, whether we're conscious of it or not. I think Vianne's mother has a number of serious problems which are not quite explained because Vianne doesn't know why her mother is the way she is, and so we can't know because this is Vianne telling her own story. But certainly Vianne's mother values her freedom much more than she values any advantage that there is in staying put. She's always been on the run from this character she calls the man in black, who may or may not be real, who may be a kind of manifestation of her fear, or who may actually be an individual. We don't quite know this for a long time, but she is always on the run. She is happier when she is on the move. She doesn't allow Vianne to keep anything in terms of toys or books or possessions for very long, because if Vianne gets too attached to things, she will start wanting to root to a place. And so there is always this idea that they have to make sacrifices in order to be free. And one of these sacrifices is any kind of other human connection to anybody. They have each other. That's all they need. Except that's not all Vianne needs, of course.
Right.
And she was set up for failure because when her mother's no longer there, she's lost, not tethered to anybody, and doesn't have that roots and community and has to find that for herself.
Absolutely. And she doesn't want the same life for her own daughter. She's already decided this. She doesn't want her daughter not to have friends. She would like her to have a home. She wants to have a kitchen with her own things in it. She wants her child to go to school. All these things that she doesn't quite know how to achieve, but she knows that they're important.
Yeah. And I love that you said, to some extent, maybe we all imprint some of those fears onto our children, those of us who have children, have raised children, because that is so true, because you've got experiences throughout life and you want to prevent that same harm to your children. And so you warn them, you talk to them, you have a little bit of angst about the decisions they're making. And, this book is a reflection on motherhood. And I did have to think about those things as I was reading it. So, very well done. Well, and I know we're going to let you go in just a second. Julia is going to talk to you about that. But I wanted to ask you, there's some room between the end of this book and Chocolat from 1999. Is there another story that you plan to tell between that and the movie time?
A number of people have asked me that, and I have to say I hadn't thought about it before. But it's true that there is a gap. There is a gap that needs to be filled. It could very well be that there is another story before Chocolat. But of course, there are stories that might happen after The Strawberry Thief, which is the last book I wrote about Vianne and her daughters. And of course, her daughters have stories of their own. And I might visit them and see where they've gone and follow their path too. So I actually don't know. Usually it takes me a while between these books. I usually have to wait 5, 6 years between these books because I have to let events develop. At the end of The Strawberry Thief, I thought, right, okay, Vianne and I have been on this journey of motherhood for 25 years. It is important at this stage, before either of us moves on, for us both to look back, which is why I came up with an origin story. It was an interesting journey for me. I mean, partly because I had to go back to the 21-year-old I used to be and try to recreate that voice for Vianne. I enjoyed it enormously. It wasn't easy. It was quite a challenge to forget the maturing process and to try to go back to that slightly abrasive personality I think she had at that age. I certainly did. It would be quite nice to keep that voice for a while. So it's certainly not off the table at all.
I didn't realize you were that young when you wrote that story.
I wasn't
Oh,
quite. I was a little older.
yeah.
We've matured together more or less in real time.
Yeah.
I think she's aged rather better than I have, but I saw her as being just a few years younger than I was when I wrote Chocolat, although we had a child of pretty much the same age. And then kind of time has restored itself from then on. We are both more or less the same age now. And
So
we've got more alike. I mean, we were very different at one point, and we've got slightly more alike because, as old friends often do, we've borrowed characteristics from each other.
I love that your approach to storytelling and letting, things come to you over time and, let it percolate. And so while that's going on, my last question for you is just if you have anything that you're working on or that you're excited about and that you're willing to share with listeners, because I know your resume is insane and it seems like you have your hand in a lot of pots. And if there's just anything that you want to talk about, then we would love to hear.
Well, I'm always working on at least one more thing, sometimes several things, because part of my process is that I tend to work on 2 things or 3 things at the same time. And I'll take one project for as far as it goes, and then I'll let it rest a little, and I will work on something else in the meantime, which means that I've already finished my next book, which is very different from Vianne. It's a sort of supernatural, in fact, set on the Yorkshire moors. Very different, kind of creepy, I'm really enjoying it. I've just finished editing it now, so that should be out sometime next year. And I'm also working on a number of other things which are not book related. I've got some musical projects going on, and I've been working with a London perfumer called 4160 Tuesdays, and we've created a Vianne scent, which is basically an illustration to one of the chapters in the book. It's called Vianne's Confession. And when I have been doing my events in the UK, I've been signing books and also spritzing them with the scent and reading the passage so that people will get the more immersive experience with the extra layer of illustrative content. It's been very interesting. I think people respond very well to scent. And because the book is full of scents and tastes anyway, it makes sense for it to be a scent illustration rather than a visual one.
Well, I think scent is our strongest memory, like sense that we have. So you're effectively creating a world, like just adding another layer, which is awesome.
I think it is. I think it's very, to me, it's very intuitive to have as much sensory immersion in a story as you can get. And everybody understands sound and visual because everybody writes in sound and vision, but actually we have scent and taste, which is, it's a very visceral, very nostalgic sense. And people pick up on this, and it makes them see the text in a different way.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Sounds absolutely wonderful. And we hope that you come back on the show to talk about your forthcoming book, the one on the moors. That sounds fascinating. And
I'd
I
love
got
that.
I would love that too. And I know Julia would as well. I'm going to tell our listeners that they can find you online. You have a beautiful website, Joanne Harris, and you definitely interact with your readers and your listeners through your website. You've got a lot of content there, and they can find this fantastic book, Vienne, as well as all the other books that you've written. So we're very excited for you. We're wishing you all the best on this one. And thank you again for coming on, Joanne.
Oh, thank you so much, both of you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It has.
Well, that was awesome. I feel like we entered a world. We watched the movies, we've read the books, got our hands on this beautiful new book, Vianne, which is set to come out in September. And now I just feel like I want more from her world.
I know, absolutely. In fact, in honor of this interview, somebody bought me a bourbon smoky chocolate bar. And
Oh,
all I could think about while I was eating it is trying to savor all of those layers. Because again, you learn so much about the history of chocolate, but also our enjoyment of it, our rejection of it, the bitterness, the sweetness. And
yeah.
all of those themes, of course, are reflected in her stories. And she does write with that sensory thing in mind. We are smelling, we're feeling the wind, we're feeling that internal pressure. Very well done. Very well done. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I know you did too.
I can't believe you didn't share the chocolate bar with me.
There's a little piece left. All right, listeners, we have some fantastic authors coming up. We've got Daniel Silva with An Inside Job, Don Winslow, The Final Score, Lou Burney with Crooks, A Family Portrait, Ashley Ream, The Peculiar Gift of July, Mariah Blake, They Poisoned the World, Life and Death in the Age of Forever Chemicals. We've got Christina Baker Klein and Ann Burt coming back with Please Don't Lie, Isabella Maldonado and Jeffrey Deaver with The Grave Artist, Laura Griffin with Innocence Road. We have several others that we just secured this week, so we can't wait to announce those. But we love that you're tuning in. We're continuing to grow every week, and thank you for sharing our socials. Keep on coming back, and we know why you do. It's because your favorite authors are here on Bookstorm Podcast, and they're here live. So we know you love it and enjoy it.